And we are back. It has been a moment. Welcome back to the Creator Sessions. We're here with Moadh Bukhash, the Chief Marketing Officer of Emirates MBD. Welcome to the show, mate.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine.
First question. You come from a family of creators.
Yeah.
Your mother is an inspirational voice across media channels. Your brothers have built a well-respected influencer agency, and you've built a stellar career in communications.
Too kind.
That's not a coincidence.
Probably isn't.
What was in the water at the Bukhash household?
Yeah, it'd be interesting, right? I mean, to be honest, I've thought about it, and it's not the first time I hear the question. But so it's not just my mother. I have to say, my father. In fact, my father's family are quite a few of them are architects.
Mm-hmm.
So we grew up with that in our home. My dad's very, very passionate. I mean, he's very much sort of on historical restoration.
Okay.
So Bastakia, which is now Fahedi or Shandeva, and Sheikh Saeed's house and all that, that's all his work.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
So he's spent a lot of great stories. I mean, I'm happy to jump into it. He's got some brilliant stories on how sort of, he found his passion in architecture. But it's always been there. I even remember my mom being at home and sort of just to address her passion. She did sort of pottery and then painted pottery and then did calligraphy on pottery and sort of always iterated on top of that. So I think to some extent we've always been exposed to some form of creativity, and that's transpired somehow, at least in a couple of them. I mean, I have a lot of brothers. I have a lot. You probably see a couple of them, but I have 7 brothers and
7 brothers.
Yeah, I mean, totally from both my parents, and 1 sister. Poor thing. I will say that she's probably never going to have a mean husband, right? We're all here to protect her. All the of us.
Absolutely. It's really interesting how you've each created space in different areas of the industry. What would you say that you've learned from your family that's helped shape your career and vice versa?
Quite a lot. I mean, I think it's quite difficult to pinpoint, where you picked up that lesson or where it was reinforced. I think I'll pick up a few things from my dad. Definitely, I think sort of pursuing your passion. I say this, and he's retired now, but I think he had one job, one employer, right out of college, all the way down to retirement,
Amazing.
29, 30 years.
Amazing.
And he did his hobby. His job was his hobby.
Yeah.
He loved architecture. He loved historical restoration. And he just pursued that. And he made a career out of it, and a very successful one, thankfully. So I think I've picked up a couple of things from that, from my mother as well. I think sort of on the psychology, sort of love of psychology and the love of the humanities, I think I've picked up from her. So I think there's a few things that sort of come together, and it boils into the formula that I sort of repeat, and what makes a good marketing professional is, it used to be 2 things. It used to be that you had to be a good artist, so a good creative, and you had to be a good psychologist, so knowing your customer, knowing their sort of habits and tendencies. And now I add the 3rd layer, which is data science, sort of that objectivity and that measurability. And I think those, at least the first 2 things, I definitely got from my childhood. I got it from my brother. My brother actually was my older brother, Enes, was into photography when Flickr was quite popular.
Back in the day.
Yeah, I remember those days. Yeah. So I think we've got a bug. I don't know where it comes from, to be honest. You'd have to ask the genetics experts, but
amazing.
There's something there,
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Was there a specific moment that you felt like, creativity in general or being in that sort of creative space, and for you to start applying it, or being, inquiring around creativity?
I don't know. I've always felt like a failed creative in a sense, right? It's almost like what do they say? They say every failed actor is a movie critic. That's me.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's me.
How so?
I don't really have sort of a talent, right?
I'm sure. I'm sure you
No, I don't. Like I can't draw. My handwriting, I can't even read it most of the time. It's just I don't. I'm a big football fan, so you watch people like Messi, and I was watching the Netflix documentary. If you haven't, Captains of the World, great documentary, by the way.
That's the second time I've been recommended that in the last week.
A really cool concept. They followed the captains of each national team throughout the World Cup. Really interesting. Anyway,
it sounds cool.
But so Messi almost has like a natural gift, right? It's the same with a lot of artists, and I work obviously in marketing, so I've got a lot of designers and artists around me, and they'll just pick up a pen and sketch something. I'm like, what are you doing? How are you doing that? And obviously, a lot of it comes from practice. A lot of it comes from perseverance. But I definitely don't have either the perseverance or the talent, you know. But I did always enjoy. I felt like there's something in me. So I used to write a lot. I did a few columns. Got into photography, and then drone photography was sort of just fell into my lap. I had a friend who was visiting from Canada, and he had built his own drone. And I was fascinated by it. And it was sort of like the perfect marriage of the two things I love most, which is tech and creativity. So for me, it was perfect. So I got into drone photography, and then unfortunately, I had a few mishaps in the country. Regulation became a bit more difficult for hobbyists. So I bought a handheld. I bought a DSLR, and in fact, just yesterday, I got a 800 millimeter lens that I'm dying to use.
Nice.
Yeah, let's hope it works out.
How important do you think it is really to be able to be creative or to have that artistic niche in the marketing world? Because you mentioned, we were speaking a little bit earlier, and we were saying that sometimes people get into marketing, perhaps, without going through the Marcom's background in terms of training or.
So I think there's a few things I'd like to point out. I think the first thing is essentially what you're saying. I think it's you need to know what you're talking about, right? If I'm sitting there on client side and I'm working with, an agency or a producer or a director or whatever may be the case, sort of someone who's doing the production, I need to be able to speak their language. I need to be able to give them good feedback. And I'm a big believer that the agency is only as good as the brief. And the agency will be as lazy as your brief is as well. With all due respect to everyone, I think on both sides of that argument and of that dynamic, it's important that the client pushes the agency and gives them enough direction, and the agency also has to be able to. It's not easy, I think it's difficult, but to be able to have some ingenuity, to have some kind of inspiration in the work, and I'll tell you, I struggle with this, and I work very closely with the agencies that we work with, and we have great relationships, but I don't think they like me very much, I'll be honest, because I'm demanding, but I think I want to be demanding, right? I think that's the difference between good and great is you don't, beg for awards and accolades. It's not about, what a magazine said about you or what, it's just that I need to go to sleep every night knowing that I did my best. Yeah.
I think part of the challenge with, obviously over the years, worked with many different clients, and one of the challenges is the client not always knowing exactly what it is that they want. And when they do, not necessarily being able to communicate it in a way that is maybe an effective brief or at least an informed conversation is one of the challenges that we do have. So to your point, dear, about the question about having this, what was a side gig of creativity? Yeah, this is your sandbox, right? This is where you find out what you like, find out what you think works. This is your sort of depth of research. So when you come to the table from a work standpoint, you're like, okay, I know what it is that I want. I know how to communicate that because I've tried and tested and I've played in the space. I think that's really useful, which maybe like we can extrapolate that into lessons for marketers in terms of coming into this space, is make sure that you have that passion, that place of creativity that you can draw from, so that it'll make you far more effective at work.
100%. And I think you've nailed that, because, it's not like I have to be an expert in animation and CGI and, VFX and photography and it doesn't matter. It's all transferable.
Yeah.
If you understand the creative process, whether it's drawing or writing or animation or whatever may be the case, I think the magic is on understanding that development process. Right? How do you put a story together? How do you create inflection points? How do you pull in the audience? Or how do you create something compelling out of it? I think that's the point. Whether it's a still photo or a video or whatever may be the case, it sort of doesn't matter. And I think I'll just maybe stress that point. And, I give this advice. I'm getting to be a bit on the older side now. So, I have all these gray hairs. So I have friends or, colleagues or acquaintances that will phone me and say, my daughter is getting to college and my son's getting to college and, any advice and, what would you recommend their career be? And I say the same thing that I've said for 20 years. Throw them in an agency, let them be underpaid, let them be overworked, let them complain and work weekends, let them do all of that, right? Get their hands as dirty as possible. And my advice to not just parents, but to individuals too, sort of graduates or soon to be graduates, is don't worry about the money. I promise you it'll come. I promise you it will come. Spend until you're 25, 26, 28, 30, depending on your career and how fast you progress and how, you know, how luck sort of serves you. For that first part of your career, your focus and your priority should be acquiring skills and reacquiring and practice and practice and practice and getting your hands dirty and understanding all the industries and sectors that you're sort of blessed to be able to be exposed to, so that when you hit 30 or 28 or 32 or whatever may be the case, people will be dying to get you, and those offers will start flying in and those numbers will go up, and hey, guess what? You can drive that Lamborghini.
Yeah. That's a really good point, actually. Yeah. If we were to scale that on your personal journey, could you talk us maybe through, you know, how did you start in this in this line, and what was your sort of getting your hand dirty chapter of life?
Yeah, so it's quite funny actually. I mean, in my teenage years, I didn't think I was going to be in marketing. I was about 12 or 13. My best friend's dad got him a PC, compact.
Nice.
And started doing like Visual Basic, so basic coding. And he sort of exposed me to it, and I fell in love with it. I thought, well, I'm going to build games, you know, I'm going to sort of just be a computer scientist and so on and so forth. So I went through my entire teenage years, so between 13 and 17, when I got into college, thinking I'm going to be in computer science.
Yeah.
So I did. I went to American University of Sharjah, or in Sharjah. So enrolled for a computer science major, spent about 2 months. I was like, yeah, this is not for me. Because I love tech, but coding is like learning a language.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm the worst. Yeah, I'm the worst at that. I try to take Spanish, try to take French. Yeah. It's just not working out. I'm not good at memorizing. I'm much more of a visual learner. Anyway, bit of an existential crisis at 17. What do I do with my life? I've spent the last 4 or 5 years of my life, you know, very sort of single track. So I did the silliest thing, and I went online and I did, you know, what should I do in my life? The job fit me. Ask Jeeves back in those days. You know, I did one of those silly questionnaires with very generic questions. But hey, guess what? At the end it said, hey, you should be in marketing.
No,
and I had a good friend who was at AUD, American University of Dubai, who was doing marketing as a major. And he said, yeah, it's great. You know, come and check it out. Just come to the class one day. I went to the university, spoke to the professor, said, could I just sit in on the class? Do you mind? And she was really sort of generous, said, more than happy to answer any questions. Sat there and I was like, yep. This is it. Right. So it was always between visual communications or marketing. And then my dad said, you know, you probably make more money in marketing. So take that career. I said, fine. Okay, we took that on. I guess I'm blessed it was a good questionnaire online. It sort of worked out in that sense. But then sort of to answer your question, so the first ever job I had, I was still in college. I worked for Ernst & Young, now EY, not in marketing. I was in technology and knowledge management, you know, the most consulting job title you'll probably come across. But I think being at one of the big 4 accounting firms and consulting firms, the work ethic you pick up from that. I mean, I'm not joking. We had a bedroom in the office.
Oh, wow.
And that's not because the executives wanted to take a nap. It was because people spent weekends in the office. So you needed somewhere to sleep, right?
There's a lot to be said for a period of your life where you go all in on things, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I talk about a lot is micro imbalance and macro balance, right? So if you want to try and achieve in multiple areas of life over a longer period of time, you have to go all in certain spaces, certain times, right? And sometimes that's work, and it might be a few years, and it might be you just almost martyr yourself to get the skills, the mindset, the work ethic just inbuilt. And then you can go and focus on other things, and you can expand your areas of focus. But I feel if you don't do that at some point, you don't hardwire that into your system, and then that plays out. You know, you add 20 years to that, and it takes you on a different path.
And do it while you can. You hit your 30s, you've got kids, you know, you've got responsibility.
Kids 3 weeks ago, so I know.
Congratulations. Congratulations. I'm going to sleep for 2 years. Good luck.
2 years.
Well, once you hit 3 years, it's going to be fun, I promise.
Great. I've only got 3 years to go.
Yeah, while you can, I think, right? I mean, when can you? You can do it when you're early in your career, when you're sort of maybe single, and you can afford to not sleep, you know, 8 hours a night or whatever may be the case. And look, I think in the end, it has to be a decision that you have to make for yourself. You know, you are and I say this too, we have a lot of junior staff join us. I think that's one of the great things of that I see at Emirates NBD and a lot of our national organizations is because the UA population is quite a young population. And we're so few in comparison to the larger population that I can't remember the exact number, so forgive me, Mr. Yahya, if I get this wrong. But I had this wonderful executive director when I was at Moadh, and he just did research just because I guess he was interested to see, in anywhere else in the world, for every 1,000 students in high school, how many of them need to be CEOs? Right? So good question. And whatever the ratio was, like 1 out of 1,000 or 1 of 100, right? But for UA nationals, because we're so few and the country is moving so fast and all these new positions are opening up, there's so many leadership positions that need to be filled by Emiratis because we have obviously quotas and so on. I think it was like 1 in 9 high school students needs to be CEO level.
Wow.
That's crazy. Yeah. I mean,
That's not a journey everybody wants to go on.
No.
Even if it's been jacked up to be glamorous.
That's true. Yeah.
So obviously our organizations spend a lot of time upskilling, developing, and so on. And I think that's one of the things I like to have a conversation around with our new joiners and our fresh grads is don't wait for someone to give you something. That's not going to happen. If you want to be great, if you want to build a wonderful career, take ownership. It's, you can sort of take the horse to the water, right? But you can't make the horse drink the water. But I think there's something to that. There's something to what you were saying about while you're able to martyr yourself or sort of push yourself beyond the edge, that's what it takes to be great. If you want to be just good, kudos to you. Good, fine. Maybe that's balance and that's happiness for you, and great. Yeah, good for you.
Yeah, I mean,
whatever works for you.
You're solving for happiness, right? And that's a different formula for different people.
Yeah, I mean, and also happiness is another thing. I can talk about this for hours, but I find that at least happiness. Sorry to digress, but people treat it as a destination, but it's not. It's a fleeting moment.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, survival and evolution did not gear us for happiness.
Absolutely not.
Not at all.
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite. It's just to survive.
Was it the saber-toothed tiger that we were constantly protecting ourselves from, right?
Exactly.
This is why
so we're not geared for happiness. Although it would be wonderful to be happy. And it also, you get to homeostasis, right? So if you're always happy, not happy, right? You can't always be happy. In fact, you need that yin yang, right? You need a bit of,
absolutely.
You need a bit of sadness to be happy too, right? Absolutely.
And they are definitely fleeting. And I think once you recognize that it's in the process, that you'll find happiness and it's not that destination, that's when things become a bit sweeter, I would say.
My team and I have a hashtag that I probably need to put up on the wall somewhere. It's hashtag small wins.
Nice.
But it's the idea that, you think all the big moments, and when I win that Cannes Lion, or, when I get this and that, I'm going to be the happiest I could be. But actually, the happiest is in like these silly little jokes that we have between meetings, or these little sort of nuances that we experience. And I think it's that collective, right? To say it's not the journey, it's not the destination, it's the journey. And I think there's something to that's where happiness genuinely lies, at least for me.
And it's society's wide in a way. I'll give you an example. So I read, we all probably know Stephen Bartlett, right? So Stephen Bartlett, he wrote a book after he sold the agency Social Chain in the UK. And society tells us when you go through an event like that, and obviously financially was very much rewarded, that's the destination. Yeah. That's the, when you get, you work for all of these years and you get to that point where someone sends that money to your bank account, and you're like, wow, that's it. Pure bliss, happiness, made it. Yeah. And he said that it was some ridiculous number, like in the hundreds of millions. And he said he's walking through the streets in London, and obviously these deals take time to go through. And he gets the SMS from the bank to say this has been deposited on your account. And he says he just looked at his phone. He just put it back in his pocket and carried on walking. Yeah. And he was like, I just carried on walking. He said nothing changed. Like literally nothing changed. He said, so what he was trying to explain, and this is obviously extrapolated from the book, the story that we're told is a lie. This whole, you have to get there, and then you have to get there, this next thing will cause us to fly through our lives at such a pace where we get to this point where we think we're supposed to be happy. And now we're upset because we're not happy.
Right.
And now we're like, is there something wrong with me? Because I thought I was supposed to start to talk.
And everyone expects you to be happy, right? Everyone expects you must be the happiest person in the world. You're like, you must be so happy you did the thing. And then you're feeling like, well, no,
A
because
bit of a letdown.
that small little thing that I did when, to your point, the small wins that I did like a few years ago that was like seemingly insignificant was actually the most important thing because it didn't have all of this, fanfare around it.
Yeah. It could be deflating, I get to imagine, right? And I think I'm a big football fan, big Arsenal fan, big Arsene Wenger fan, of course. But I think he said something, and I'll echo it. He said that all the values I learned in life, I learned through football. And for me, a big portion of the values that I learned in my life were actually through Arsene Wenger. And I think people that went through that period that I went through, late 90s, early 2000s, very much see him as a bit of a father figure. And there's a lot of wisdom that I think he sort of conveyed. And one of the ones that I really pick up is, I think he was sort of being interviewed by the BBC or something. And somebody said, you've won this and won that, all these titles, all these trophies, so on and so forth. Where are they? Like, where are the medals? And he said it's like somewhere in the closet, maybe. I don't know. I was like, what do you mean you don't know? It's not like up on a shelf or something? He's like, no, that's yesterday. I don't live in yesterday.
Yeah.
Right? I live in tomorrow. And I think that should be the fuel.
Yeah.
To your point, I think the fuel shouldn't be, I got that transfer in my account, or I reached this level, or I was, I got that award or whatever. It's almost like it's the journey that should be the fuel that gets you there, right?
That's interesting. Tim Grover, the mindset and performance coach for Michael Jordan, I've read a couple of his books relatively recently, and obviously he's come to light after The Last Dance and all the rest of it. And he's got some really interesting takes on success. And it's exactly what you just said there in different construct, where he says that, I'll try and get this right, he says, success will pour the champagne for you and then knock the glass over before you try and drink it. Because they say success lasts for just the moment that it lasts in. The moment after, it's already done. So you're back to zero again. That's why it talks in the context of all the greats wake up the next day and realizing what they achieved yesterday doesn't mean anything because day one is today and away we go again.
Absolutely.
We have to win the next championship or the next thing that they're gearing towards. But this mindset of living in the past because you did something, and if I bring that into how we try and run this organization and build the business, every year, we'll achieve certain things and we're very proud of that and we celebrate those things. But the next morning we're coming in and we're like, right, that's zero, that doesn't matter anymore. Like we've got, what have we got on the table today? Where do we want to go? And let's just look forward. And you have to have that mindset. Otherwise, it's very easy to become complacent, especially if you're doing
washed up.
Yeah,
you become washed up, right? I think that's it. I think if you're in Arabic, we say "Aish al atlal," which is sort of living on hilltops and looking back.
I'll have to learn that.
It's a good one. Yeah, it's a good one.
Today I just realized there's so many terms in Arabic that I need to.
I know, right? It's funny. I was having this conversation yesterday or day before yesterday about AI coming on board. Are we going to lose language because you could sort of just have a real-time translator in your ear that conveys what the other person is saying. But I think I really just don't want to lose nuance. I don't know if you speak Arabic, but I'm sure you do. Arabic is a very, very deep and nuanced and layered language, and there's so much poetry that comes out of it that I think it's hard to convey in English sometimes. I'll say, so you'll find me throwing a phrase here and there.
That's beautiful. It's a good reminder as well for me to actually like expand the scope of how much.
And marketing is fun, I'll tell you. And it's I obviously I'm from the UAE. I live in the UAE, and I do a lot of marketing. Most of the marketing I do is in the UAE. But the UAE is not an Arabic heavy, for obvious reasons. Yeah. So we struggle with that, but then when we sort of target a specific nationality or whatever, then we can have a bit of fun. And get into sort of some cultural nuance.
Speaking about the UAE and the market, let's talk a little bit about sort of the campaigns that you're involved in and, the fun, the moments, the highlight moments that sort of like lived with you as well.
Yeah.
How do you see marketing to the country and marketing to the audience in the UAE from an approach perspective, from a, again, perhaps even language perspective? How do you define the process with your agencies that you work with?
So it's, if I may, maybe I'll take a step back just to draw a bigger sort of frame around the context. So let's talk about financial services. That's what I work in. I work in a bank. I work for Emirates MVD. It's an absolute pleasure, by the way. I'm not just saying that. It is.
That'll make it to the teaser, right?
So I've been in a couple of brands which are interesting. I call them utility brands. Some people call them commodity brands, but they're brands that people love to hate,
Okay.
but absolutely need. Right. So I say this to the team. I say no one takes their kids on the weekend to a bank branch, right? But you might go to the Apple store, you might go to Virgin Megastore, you might go see a car, at a dealership or whatever. Those are brands you want to be sort of involved or interact with, or there's a propensity towards. But DIWA, like utility companies, your telecom provider, Etisalat, do banks, insurance. It's like adulting. It's just part of becoming an adult, right? You have to have a bank account, you have to have insurance, you have to worry about this and that. You can't live without electricity and so on. Utility brands are quite commoditized, so differentiation is a challenge, which I'd love to talk about a bit more. But I think one of the hardest things is creating affinity. Like you want that Harley Davidson effect, right? You want people sort of love your brand, like people sort of worship Apple, even though I'm definitely an Android user. But it's not easy, right? Because again, you're not the star of the show. Your brand, your existence in your customer's life, you're not the star of the show. And I say this to the team over and over again. I say, it's not, your car loan is the least of the customer's concern. They want the car. The loan is just a means to an end thing, right? Like if I could buy it cash outright, I would, why would I want to loan, pay interest and deal with the bank and all of that, right? But I think in embracing that idea that, quote unquote, you're the wind beneath a customer's wings, that, you want to reach a certain level of livelihood, you want to provide for your children, you want to put money aside for a college fund, you want to buy a home and, get a mortgage, all of those things. We are here to sort of support you in that journey in a conscientious way, obviously. You don't want to overstretch yourself, and we could talk about financial literacy and a lot of sort of work that we're doing around that. But how do I take, this is my dream, if you had to ask me what my KPI is how do I take a brand that people love to hate, or at least barely tolerate, right? And really turn it into something compelling, and for people to stop seeing what's the bank doing to get me, or sort of being opportunistic with me, to flipping that argument and saying, the bank's been a financial advisor for me. They've been there for me when I needed them. And I'll tell you, I'm inside the bank. There's plenty of proof. I mean, we went through COVID. It was a tough time, obviously, for a lot of individuals, but even more so for businesses, right? I mean, you sort of closed shop restaurants in particular. So a lot of the work that we did was on relieving businesses from sort of payments, or giving them, payment holidays, and really sort of trying to give them, some breathing room, so that when things kick back in action. And I think those are the things that people remember, right? People don't remember that you gave them 3% interest rate versus 3.5% or whatever may be the case, right? But they'll remember when you were there for them. And for banks, for insurance companies, I say this again to my team and my colleagues all the time, we're in a very unique position. We're a very, very unique position. Banks are with the consumer for a very, very long time, right? Unless you're forced to, you're probably not going to switch banks, right? Unless you've had a terrible service, you're not going to switch banks. So you're usually with the bank 7, 10, 15, sometimes far more, right? I mean, we have people that have been with us since they were 4 years old. Your parents opened an account for them, and now they're 34 or whatever. I mean, we're 60 years old this year, so Emirates is celebrating its 60th year. So one, you have a very, very long-term relationship. So your potential and your ability to form a good bond and a strong bond and a sort of warm bond is high. And not only that, but, the data we have on each consumer, obviously within protection and, within ethical standards and central banks regulations and so on, but it's very intimate. I know where you spent your money. When you went on your holidays. I know when you bought a car. I know when you got into a bit of trouble because you bought that TV that you shouldn't have, or you made a poor decision here and there. So I know you for a very long time, and I know you on a very, very deep level, right? So those insights and that time gives us the ability and that sort of that landscape to be really, potentially at least, really build strong bonds with our consumers. Whereas if you were sort of, Coca-Cola or some much more of a fast-moving consumer good, you don't have that ability,
disconnect.
right? You're sort of an impulse buy, right? We are not an impulse buy. No one gets a loan on a whim.
Yeah.
Right? And if you do, don't, please. Yeah, just don't. Bad idea. Yeah, think it through. But I think that's essentially the goal, right? The goal is for us to take something that people tolerate to something that people really love.
It's a very interesting take. And I think for a brand, self-awareness is the foundation of good communications, right? I think especially in the space that you are in, you have to start from a position of reality that not everybody loves their bank. It's a utility, as you said, right? It's something that you absolutely have to have. And from our experience that we touched on earlier, of doing community management for a bank a few years ago, not many people come on social to be like, I love you guys.
Positive,
I love you guys. You guys are great. Like, thanks so much for my thing. And, you know, it's super happy. Everyone's complaining about something, right? Because
I challenge you to go through all the Instagram accounts of the banks in the country. And any post you find, just scroll through the comments.
No, they're all the same. 100%. And obviously, even going through some of the Emirates MBD things, it's the same thing, but it's just natural, right? Oh, I didn't get my credit card. I applied for it. All this sort of stuff, right? As expected.
And we are a service brand, right? And we can't forget that.
Yeah.
I think it's important to embrace that as well, to say that, I can do the fun things on top of my service, right? So I can give you tickets to a concert, or, I can give you access to a lounge at an airport, or I can give you valet parking at Dubai Mall. But if your transfer doesn't go through, or if you couldn't deposit a check, or you couldn't sort of the hygiene element isn't catered to.
Exactly that.
There's no point in all the frills. Right? So you have to really focus on that basic service. Get the basics right. Yeah.
And it's people are naturally highly emotional when it comes to their money, right? They go to work and they work super hard for it, and if they feel that something is not right when it comes to their finances, then they're going to challenge that. It's interesting what you're saying about data, and it's one of those things where if you asked people a set of questions and then you looked at their credit card statement, they're probably very different.
Oh, yeah. I have a lot of facts there.
Yeah, like what they say is important to them, right?
That's what we're spending on.
I'm sure that's incredibly interesting.
Especially this part of the world, by the way. You'd be surprised. So we did this, if I may sort of dwell on this for a sec. So I talk about financial literacy a lot. It is something, I don't want to give away too much, but we are in the works for something. I hope it's going to be quite compelling. So not just, save 20% of your budget type of thing, but really an engaging program that's not just focused on technical financial literacy, but also sort of the discipline and knowing, don't buy that on an impulse, don't do that on a whim, have some rigor.
Yeah.
I think one of the most important principles that people don't follow, unfortunately, and I'm not any better, I promise you, I think it's not easy, is people sort of do this in this process, right? They get their salary, they pay their bills, they go through their month, and then one day before their next salary, they're like, I have 2,000 dirhams left in my account. That's my savings, right?
Yeah.
So it's the leftover of what you've gone through in the month. But one of the most important principles is to sort of save first. So you get your salary is 10,000 dirhams, put 1,000 dirhams aside, right? That's 20% or 10%. To put 2,000 dirhams aside, 20%. Then pay your bills. Then say, this is how much I have to go out on the weekends or whatever the case. In any case, sorry, I digress. But let's talk about financial literacy. And we talked about how people's opinions of where they are versus where they really are is quite a distance. And I have the numbers. So the World Bank does a financial literacy index. It's a global index, publicly available. Scandinavian countries, no surprise, are on top. So they're about somewhere around the 70s.
It seems to be on top.
I know, right?
Like schooling, education, like everything,
work-life balance,
diet, what are they doing over there?
They have a lot of oil, to be fair. That's a good start. But but jokes aside, I think they're a wonderful benchmark for how society can operate and how to find a good balance. Education is a big thing. Anyway, so Scandinavian countries are quite high on that. They're somewhere on the 70th or 75th percentile. The UAE, I think, being a young country and a very expat-heavy country, a lot of blue-collar workers also in this country, I think we're somewhere on the 40th percentile, so not great. But good news is there's a lot of room to grow. So just to demonstrate that point, so the World Bank does a practical test to know whether you're financially literate or not, right? What we did as a first protocol, and we learned our lesson, is we did a perception study.
Okay.
So we go to you and say, you know, how do you think you manage your finances?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, yeah, that's
On top of it.
Pretty good.
I think in this part of the world also we have such a taboo around money, right? And it's all about like, how do I look? It's not about money. It's about how, you know, what kind of lifestyle am I able
you
to
can spend,
afford,
not
right?
to
How much can I spend? And, you know, sort of that facade, right? Yeah. So we did the perception study, and we hit the 70th percentile. And everyone was like, yeah, we're awesome. Then we went and sort of did a bit of surgical work, and the difference was the World Bank was right. So we're somewhere around the 40th percentile in reality, while people think they're on the 70th percentile, or at least don't want to admit that they're beyond that, right? So the program that we're building, I think, is partly aimed at breaking down some of those barriers and having an honest conversation, right? And I speak for myself. I've been through financial stress. If you have, you know,
of course,
what that's like. It doesn't just affect you, it affects your wife or your spouse, your family, your children, you know, the community at large, I think gets affected sort of in a ripple effect. It's one of those things that I think if you're able to resolve, the impact that you can have is so multiplied, and the relief that you can sort of give to a person is invaluable.
Absolutely.
Right? Invaluable. So we're lucky in the sense that, you know, the thing that we're hopefully good at, as Emirates NBD that is something that could have hopefully a very positive impact on society.
Nice.
Amazing.
Yeah. And it impacts the relationship, and again, that bond, right? That bond that you have with the customers, and it's a good platform to be able to change the financial literacy along.
You know, we had a customer that said this to us. It was interesting. He said, you know, the bank's the first call I get if I miss a payment, but a bank never congratulated me on saving my first X interest or whatever.
That's interesting.
And, you know, without
That's a good
giving too many secrets away, but I think one of the things that we're really hoping to do is to move away from selling products only to creating an experience. That if you see me on camera, I'm holding up my smart ring, my Aura ring.
I was going to ask a question.
Yeah, so if you use a Fitbit or if you use Garmin's or Whoop or whatever, I think that's a very good parallel to draw. Where a bank can be your financial coach, not on a monthly basis, but on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. I mean, Spotify does this really well, right? At the end of every year, I get this Spotify Unwrapped, and it tells me all the horrible songs that I listen to. I always say it's my daughter, it wasn't me. But
a lot of Taylor Swift.
There's something to that, right? Yeah, a lot of Taylor Swift, Frozen and all that. She's 5 years old, so obviously there's a lot of that, a lot of Disney. But jokes aside, I think there's something to flipping the argument and flipping the dialogue and flipping the narrative to having a much more positive, nudging, encouraging dialogue with our customers rather than saying, hey, where's my payment?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, a lot of the...
pay your installments, please. But beyond that.
Compliance are going to shut this podcast down. No, that is very interesting. Banking and marketing as a whole, going through a time of fundamental change. How do you see that playing out in your space? And just for clarify, I'm talking technological change. Obviously,
right.
The digital banking is going from strength to strength. You've launched your new app, which is excellent, by the way.
Thank you.
I enjoy using it.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah,
glad to hear it.
Using it.
There's a lot more good to come in it as well. So,
amazing. So that plus the technological change, AI and the like, buzzwords that we can talk about going into the marketing space.
So, okay, good. I think the first thing a good marketeer can do, and I'm not great at it, but I'll talk about it at least, is first understand what your consumer's needs are. So let's talk about Emirates and BD. That's what I know best. We are not a niche bank. We're not a niche bank. So if you know Liv, Weo, digital banks, they have, for a marketeer, that's a much easier game. The smaller the niche, the more focused your brand can be, your tone of voice, sort of everything has an identity. But at Emirates NBD, I have a 16-year-old who's, not making any money and wants a digital lifestyle or wants this or that. And I have a 60-year-old billionaire or multimillionaire private bank client, what we call universal banks. Really hard, really, really hard because it becomes generic. It really does become generic, and at the risk of criticizing the industry, and I genuinely criticizing myself as being part of that industry, I think we don't do well as an industry in creating a brand personality or a tone of voice or any differentiation on the brand side. I think, unfortunately, we've gone far too far down the, let's compete on interest rates, let's compete on sort of the functional product service rather than the experience or the brand or sort of the user experience of the journey the customer goes through. So let's get that out of the way, right? So we have a very wide, diverse set of clients, types of clients with very different needs and wants.
Yeah.
So let's section them out. If we're talking about what we call consumer clients or sort of mass clients, so like people, hopefully like you and me, walking down the street, what we want from a bank is, I call it the 3 Fs. So fast, frictionless, and friendly. That's all you need, right? The banking app should work fine.
Yeah.
When I transfer money to my friend or, when I travel, my card should work. If, God forbid, somebody steals my card, I'm able to block, unblock, change, blah, 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 right? Fast, frictionless, friendly. But let's compare that with a private banking client. These are multimillionaires, billionaires. They don't want fast, frictionless, friendly. When you go to a Chanel store, if you walk down, walk into a Hermes store or whatever, you don't want to be out of there quick. You want it to take as long as possible. You want to be pampered. You want to be taken through and taken blah, 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 blah. That's the joy. That's the point. Right? It's the relationship. It's the experience that matters. So there's no one rule. To be honest, I think when it comes to mass consumers, where the industry is going and how marketing and how the user experience is going to transpire, is it will become much more digital, much less human interaction, I think. And I think with the advent of large language models like ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever, you can really still make that a friendly experience. Some of you might remember Eva.
Yes.
Think the good Eva, not... I miss her sometimes. Nobody does. I tried to make a funeral when we changed her, but thought that was maybe a step too far. But when it comes to sort of non-mass consumers, our prerogative is completely the opposite.
Yeah,
is creating moments of delight, creating money can't buy experiences, finding ways that we can really go the extra mile. And I'll give you one small story. I love this story. So we had, I think it was a private banking client. Anyway, he was sort of hotshot guy. I think he was Indian. He must have been Indian. Indian client. Big cricket fan. And then I think it was last year, maybe the year before, that we had the India-Pakistan game. It was sort of a big deal. Sorry, I'm not a cricket fan, but I appreciate sport at least. And our relationship manager, called him and said, I know you're a big fan. We've got tickets. Would you like to go? And he said, I have to travel. I'm out of the country. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend. Said, okay. Shut the phone. Didn't say a word. The relationship manager somehow found his way into the Indian national team's dressing room with a cricket bat. Got the bat signed by every single member of the Indian national team. Didn't say a word.
Yeah.
Waited for his client to come back from his travels and delivered it to his desk. Said, I know you missed it, but here's something to remember.
That's cool.
That customer is not going to be loyal to you because you gave him 3%.
Yeah, of course.
He's loyal to you because you thought of him, right? You made him feel fancy. Genuinely, you do care. I think to a large extent, right? And I think that's the prerogative for non-mass, is to create what we call money can't buy experiences, right? I mean, I sort of got into the job and they said, we send our clients to Zoom. I was like, man, he's a multimillionaire. You think he needs you to send them to Zoom?
Yeah.
Take the Zuma chef and send him to his house. That's an experience, right? That's something else.
Something that they can't buy.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So yesterday morning, I asked, actually both our wives work in marketing.
Yeah.
I spoke to my wife yesterday and I said, we're having this podcast today. And I said, "Got any questions?" And she said, "Yeah, I do actually have one."
Please.
Or it's more of a statement than a question, but it relates very much to what you're saying. So a mutual friend of ours works in Switzerland in private banking in Switzerland. And she said that they did some research where they, as a bank, were spending a huge amount of money trying to convert all their customers, because she spoke about Eva and all the rest, convert their customers to this digital experience.
Yeah.
And they actually
realized,
they actually realized that there was a subset of their audience, generally I would say probably the high net worth individuals, that it would actually cost the bank less to employ people to deal with those individuals as more of the relationship management side than trying to get them into the digital banking space because they don't want to speak to a computer.
Yeah.
They want to pick up the phone, talk to an individual, they've got A, B, C, and D done. So it's really interesting, like where that line is drawn.
We're still human, right? I mean,
We're
that's
still human, right? Like,
but I think that's why large language models like ChatGPT and others might be able to do the trick because it feels like a human. It feels like I'm having a conversation.
I think it could change the percentage, for sure, in terms of there are certain tasks that can be done that can feel more human, but there's still that element of, if there's something a little bit tricky,
yes, correct.
you just want to speak to a human, right? Like you don't want to go through 14 different options.
Yeah. And you know what, I'll be honest with you, I think there was a bit of a drive 2015, 2016, not just with Emirates and BD with Evo, but a few others, even telecoms that Sadat and Do, I think, sort of followed suit, to say that, you know, we can save a lot of money. And, you know, there's this advent of AI and chatbots and all of that. We can sort of just divert customers there. And it's not just in the region, actually. It's an international thing. In fact, I read an article on DBS, you know, one of the most innovative banks in the world out of Singapore. And the article said they messed up. They messed up by going too far down the digital sort of rabbit hole. I still think, you know, humans long for interaction. I mean, it's always better to talk face to face on Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever. Yeah. And we know that. We've gone through COVID, all of us, and we know what it's like. It's still better face to face. We're still human.
Right.
Now.
Still the trust, right?
Until Neuralink.
Yeah. Like 3 years roughly. I'll be the first, by the way. But
no, I think it's it's super interesting to see that development of how to handle, you know, the audience and the customers, from tech to the human connection. There's a couple of audience questions, and it's a new segment for the podcast.
Let's go.
First question is, how do you push past your creative blocks? When you've got a creative block, is there anything personally that
I shout at my agencies? No, jokes. No, jokes. Look, I think it's a tough question, to be honest, right? It's something I sort of ponder a lot. Like, where does creativity come from? They say, oh, it comes from inspiration. Okay, so where does inspiration come from, right? Yeah. There's a few schools of thought on this. I think what's worked for me is the idea of critical mass, is the idea that, you know, Michael Jordan didn't become Michael Jordan because it's just once a year he picks up a basketball. He said so, right? So the more I practice, the luckier I get. And I think that's a very important principle. And creativity is the same thing. The more you get your hands dirty, right? The more you're sort of playing around and trying things and, you know, exploring this and watching YouTube to learn a few tricks of, you know, aperture or whatever may be the case. I think the more you do that, the more you're able to get past. I think the other thing is distance. And it's an art, I'll tell you, and that's not easy, because when you're sort of into it, and I'm sitting there on Adobe Premiere Pro and trying to edit that video and trying to sort of, I'm just not getting it right. There's so much that can be gained by just go take a walk, even 5 minutes, right? Just step away, freshen your mind, have a conversation with someone you trust, have a conversation that even gets you out of that mood, and then step back in. I don't know if there's a straight answer, if I'm being completely honest with you, but I find that it is true. The more you practice, the luckier you get.
There's great tools, for sure.
I feel it's going micro, macro, right? And it's that movement between the two, related to, certainly from a personal standpoint, getting it out of the office, out of the country, and just creating space. For me, running is my passion, right? It's a way of completely
finding what works for you too, right?
Yeah. Just clear your head, and then all of a sudden things start to fall back into place. You start to join the dots. We were saying yesterday, what was I watching yesterday? I was just talking about creativity, basically just about joining the dots. Just joining the dots together. It already exists. It's just about joining them together.
Exactly.
And sometimes you have to just create the space for that, for you to see that, to find that space, to find that connection, right?
Yeah. 100%.
But I guess, find what works for you and use that, right? Whatever works for you, I guess, is the process. I'm sure everyone's got their own. Running, I think, is a wonderful way. All the great minds
walk. About running in a second.
Yeah.
You're running, right?
I'm not a good runner. I'm a terrible runner. I'll do walking.
And you can do the relay.
Is there like can I take a bicycle or something? I'll be the guy on the bike with the camera.
You can do what you like. Yeah, let's be honest.
I'll be there to cheer you on. I'll say that.
And just for anyone that is listening, that is the Bush to Bush Half Marathon, 21st of January. Yep. And we're very proud to have MSNBD as the title sponsor. So
amazing.
Looking forward. We're going to see you on the course.
Yeah, I'll be there. I'll be there at the finish line, I'll tell you. How I got there is another matter.
Amazing. There's one more, I think there's one more audience question, right?
Yeah, and I think another one is an interesting one. If you were to be living a different alternative reality, what would you be doing for work that's not what you do today?
It wouldn't be very far.
Okay,
No, I don't think it would be very far from what I do. I might be on sort of the production side,
interesting.
sort of on the creation side, but I don't think it. I think it. You know, I'm lucky that I get to do what I love. I really do enjoy what I do.
Nice.
I love doing it with the people that I do it with. I get a lot of motivation, a lot of satisfaction from putting together concepts, from connecting the dots. And I think, you know, if you've ever been client side, it's a different ballgame than being agency side. I'll tell you, it's a very, very different. You spend most of your time internally focused, you know, trying to get all the pieces of the puzzle together, getting this head of business and that head of product and this head of service and blah, blah, blah. All of those guys, a marketing function and inside an organization is very much a glue.
Interesting.
Right? So you're an agency, you get the brief, or you proactively go out with a proposal, right? And it's a very simple two-way road. Whereas in marketing, communications, reputation, brand, whatever you want to call it, your job is to be an interface and the voice of the customer, right? Everybody else, I'll take a bank, for example, the head of credit cards, or the head of loans, or the head of customer service, or the head of compliance, or they're sort of focused on their vertical as they should be, and they're not thinking of how to sort of paint the whole. Our job is to do that, right? Yeah. Our job in marketing is to do that. So, you know, some people come and say, we got this great idea, you know, this credit card, this product, or this service, or this, that. And, you know, we think it's the best thing that's ever happened to the banking industry and so on and so forth. You know, to some extent, I think there's always some, you know, sauce in there.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we have to sort of reshuffle and change and convince and lobby and say, you know, maybe there's a better way that we can put this proposition together. Let's do some research. Let's check with some focus groups and blah. So a lot of work is actually, majority of the work, to be honest, internally is developing something before it goes to market.
That sounds like a lot of stakeholder management.
A lot of it, yeah. You know, and it's funny. It's easier when it's like a proposition. You know, I have 3%, he has 4%, I have 5%, whatever. That's easy. But when you pitch a creative idea, I don't know if you've seen our latest fraud awareness campaign.
Yeah,
we sort of did a melody on "I Will Survive."
I Will Survive for you. So
watching, very nice.
Yeah. Actually, watching yesterday, we spoke to the team about this a couple of days ago.
It's fun. I mean, that's a topic we could dwell on. Sort of fraud awareness, and something that we take quite seriously. But you know, pitching that to my CEO or pitching that to whoever's sort of in charge, to say it's not about comparison on sort of apples to apples or percentage to percentage. It's a very sort of creative, subjective thing. You know, I don't like blue, he likes red, you know, and that sort of thing. That's where things get really tricky. And I think for someone in my position, you know, running a marketing department, my advice to my fellow CMOs is to say, don't try to over-engineer it and be objective. There's no objectivity and subjectivity. You have to get your board or your CEO to just trust you, and trust is earned. It's not, shouldn't ask for it. And if you ask for it, don't trust them. But I think it's something you should earn. You should be able to say, give me the room to play around and show you the results. And if the results are good, then trust me the next time and the next time and the next time. And then they'll stop asking. Yeah. Right? We'll just trust you with their opinion.
Look, it looks like you've certainly done that. If you look back on certainly that campaign itself is a standout. It's fun, it's quite out there. And if you look previous to that, the work you did with Expo 2020.
So I cannot take any credit for that personally. I think we have a wonderful large team. I have wonderful. I genuinely stand on the shoulders of giants. My predecessors have done a remarkable job building this brand out from its infancy. You know, this is a merged brand. Let's not forget, right? There was Emirates Bank, there was National Bank of Dubai.
I remember.
So around 2008, 2009, best time, by the way, real estate crisis. A merger happened. And since then, we've gone from strength to strength. And I think, we've had a great year. 2023 has been a record-breaking year for Emirates NBD. Hopefully 24 is another record-breaking year. So it is something that I genuinely can't take credit for, but it is something that I feel the weight of responsibility. And not just because that it's a brand that's a staple, but it's a national asset.
Absolutely.
And I think being a Mahati, I think that's something that I don't take lightly. It's something that I don't consider to be a brand, but it's a national treasure, right? That there's some 60-year-old company in a 50-year-old country.
Yeah.
So there's something to that. Yeah.
So one of the things you were saying there was the perspective from being an internal marketer, stakeholder management, and then the relationships with client and agency. You were recently a judge at the Agency of the Year Awards. Thank you if you judged our entry, by the way.
I can't remember.
But what did that experience teach you, or let's say show you in terms of the state of play when it comes to the agency landscape at the moment?
I'm going to say the good things and the bad things here.
Yeah.
Forgive me for my transparency, and forgive me, agency, as I do love you. So I do this regularly because I think it's important that not only fellow agency executives get to judge, but actually the clients, the ones who sort of receive the end product get to judge. I think it's good to have awards or some form of competition because it creates friction. It creates, sort of motivation in the agencies to deliver great work. But it has an ugly side. And unfortunately, I haven't been in other markets. But in our market, I think there's an sort of a unnecessary obsession with awards. In fact, to the point where, I'll never forget this. I was on a call with one of our agencies that will not be named. And the director, so I've, being me, I think, love-hate relationship I'm sure they have with me from agencies, but I get involved, scripts and treatments and all that. So we're debating something and I'm like, yeah, that doesn't work. I don't think it'll resonate. How about we change the character to this, or we sort of change the scene to this, and blah, 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 blah. And I was getting, and, agencies don't like to be sort of, and I get it, I try to do creative work too. And I'd hate if someone tells me, your photograph should have had better rule of thirds or whatever. But I think, it's in the end, I have a responsibility to my brand and to my shareholders and to my organization to make sure that the work that we put out there resonates with our audiences. And only I know that, at least I know that much better than the audience, at least presumably, than the agency, sorry. Anyway, so we're going back and forth, debating. And he says, yeah, but like, if we go down this route, how am I going to submit this? No, you've got your priorities on wrong, right? And, it's often talked about, never said, but that was said. Yeah. And, cliche advice, but advice to the agencies, focus on results for your clients and the awards will come. Yeah. No football player thinks of the Ballon d'Or, right? They think of winning the Champions League, or they think of winning the World Cup, or they think of whatever may be the case. And awards become a natural result of that.
Happens,
And guess what? The award is not your barometer for success. How you get to go to sleep at night, how you think I'm going to be 60 years old, 70 years old, telling my grandchildren, look at that brand I built, or that campaign I ran, or the difference I made. That is the true measure of success, right? Awards are like such a superficial thing. It's so surface. Yeah. Right.
I agree. So look, our perspective on those is going back to your point earlier about the small wins. It's focusing on choosing our clients to do impactful work with, delivering on that week in, week out. And if we get to a space where the team can get some recognition, then that's great. But to be approaching a project with a client to say, like,
I want to win an award with
instead of submitting, then then you wise.
We've had a conversation about this as well a few weeks ago, and we said the importance of great work and the impact of great work in the market is probably more powerful than saying, well, we just won 1 or 2 awards.
Absolutely.
The fact that people can say, hold on, who did this piece of content, or David Giss campaign, or the impact of that can outweigh, far beyond saying we've just won a certain award.
As you can imagine, I get approached by a lot of agencies, all the time. So credentials decks, credential presentations are a very common thing. I'll go through 10 a week. Almost always I'll skip awards. Yeah. Almost always.
Interesting.
Unless there's something like really sort of amazing, right? But I don't use them as a barometer. For me, I look at the work, I look at the case studies, I look at the team. Yeah. And I look at sort of their ability to not tell me how the methodology is, because anybody who's spent 2 weeks at a consulting firm can come up with a methodology. Yeah. I've been there myself. Yeah. But it's, what did that create that's different? And so show me how you went through the process of taking in insights, dealing with the clients, understanding the customer, blah, 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 or whatever you did, right? Whatever your, God-given gift of methodology is, but what's the result of that? What's the impact that you created? And, that's one thing I did want to stress, and I think we were sort of talking about it earlier. on differentiation, sort of, how you create compelling marketing. I do want to dwell on this because I think it's an important point that I'd like to say. I grew up in marketing in a space where we had almost no analytics, right? You put something on the road, you put something in the newspaper.
In the day,
Free shout-outs. Hopefully someone reads.
50% works, I just don't know when.
Exactly. And the only measure, sort of the only mechanism and lever we had was to say, the sales guy, when you make a purchase, can you ask them, where did you hear about this? Right? Everybody knows those lists. Or you get a newspaper, radio,
Other.
and everyone says other. Everyone says other because get out of my face, And I don't know if it's the right thing to ask it at the end of a sale. You should probably ask it at the beginning. Anyway, that's another matter. But that was the only way that we knew if something worked.
To measure points,
directly.
Yeah.
And I think we've swung all the way to the other end now with digital.
Trying to attribute everything.
Yeah. Everything is how many clicks you got, bounce rates, and that. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for that, right? The more measurable you can be, the better. The risk of being on that far side of the pendulum is you become very short-sighted, right? So it's like quick wins, and brands are not built quickly. If you're going to be a prisoner and a slave to your analytics, only your analytics, without having, long-termness, foresight, a brand strategy, brand attributes that you want to reinforce, you're going to get very generic, very fast, very, very fast. Brand value is sort of doomed in that scenario. So we have to find a balance between data science, creativity, and psychology. And I'll tell you, of those three things, if I had to choose one, it would be creativity every single day. Because the only thing that cuts through the clutter isn't the fact that I placed that ad in the exact same spot on Sheikh Zayed Road that, most people see it.
Yeah.
And it's not because, our clicks were in the right place or carousel was used correctly. It's because my ad was so creative that it cut through all the clutter and people just gravitated towards that piece of content. It's creativity. That's the name of the game. And I have conversations with heads of agencies, and I tell them all the time. They say, we put a really good team for you together. Account management team is awesome. I tell you, but anybody can do that. Anybody can put I'm sorry, but I mean, it's not a unique selling.
You don't want to undersell the account management
right?
team.
Nobody. It's not impossible for any agency in the world to hire a good account management team. It's not impossible for any agency to say, look at our MarTech stack and all the tools that we use. Anybody can do that. The only thing you can't buy is creativity. The only thing you can't buy is inspiration, right? And that's the industry we're in. Yeah. Right. We're not an industry of awards. We're not an industry of client management teams or tools or methodologies or case studies or whatever. We're in the business of creativity. So let's focus on our reason for being. Right? That is the reason for being.
A lot of that comes from the culture and the space that's created, because creativity can also come from everywhere, right? It's not just the creative team. It can be from the account management team. It can be from...
No, I had, sorry to interrupt, but I had, here's a good piece of maybe a good piece of advice for you as sort of running an agency, both of you. I met an agency, I probably can't say their name, but they had a nice model. So typically an agency would have a client servicing team, and then there's the planners, there's strategists on one side, there's creative on the other side, blah, blah, blah. But they eliminated, so they combined the client management team with the planners. The client management are the planners because they hear it firsthand.
Nice.
And I thought it genuinely worked out. It genuinely showed us a lot of benefit, because otherwise it's Chinese whispers.
Yeah.
Right. The client management team takes our brief, takes our feedback, relays it to the planning team or the strategy team, and then the process goes on. And a lot can get lost
in between.
There's more people involved than necessarily is needed.
So the person that's coming up with the idea should be the person taking that input.
Interesting.
I thought it was quite.
I think what you just mentioned about us being an industry of creativity, 100% subscribe to that, and it's spot on. I also just want to kind of nuance it with trust and that layer of playing field that is sometimes very important between the client and agency relationship, because you could want to try and be do an extra shot in terms of creativity and show them an idea that's a little bit bold. But if it's not
make it the third option, that's my advice. Listen, I'll tell you, I can only speak for myself. I think I can only tell you my own perspective. My dream situation is always that the agency's too far and I have to pull them back. Then I have to say, please guys, yalla, trying to push you to get creative. That's a losing battle. But yes, I think, for you being agency side, you have to gauge it. You have to sort of get a good sense for your client and their appetite for creativity. And, I'll tell you, banks, for example, in the end, I think the word trust you use is critical. That's the bedrock. That's the foundation of our brand, right? We can have all the frills, but if you don't feel safe putting your money with me in our bank, forget it, right? That's doom. So when it comes to marketing, we also have to be quite careful. And you see us, we do a bit of humor, we do a bit of fun. We try to sort of push the envelope, but we can't go too far. Like we had this fraud awareness campaign that we talked about. So I Will Survive. So we do this every year, by the way. The reason why we do it this way, have a bit of fun with it, is if we just go out and say, be careful with fraud, it sounds like stop smoking.
And
it
won't cut through.
Right? It won't cut through.
No.
So we try to do something a bit interesting with it. This year, our focus has been on reporting, which I think is something people also overlook, right? I get all these calls all the time, scammers, Emirates Post, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You just ignore them. You tell your friends maybe, but you don't report them. And that means, I'll tell you, it's heartbreaking. Every week I'll get a call. Somebody's parent was targeted by fraudsters, lifetime savings lost.
Jesus.
Yeah, they spend their entire career, they're retired now. That's all they have.
Wow.
And they lost it all in like that, right? And obviously we work very closely with them. We work with the authorities. We try to recover, where there are flaws and whatever, we find remedies for the situation. But I mean, there's no way that you can sort of understand what they're going through.
Yeah.
And their children, obviously, who are, dealing with us, you can see the impact it has on them. So let's take that situation, right? Take that and magnify it. You've got, let's say, 1,000 fraud cases a year, arbitrary number, but let's say, right? And then I, as the marketing guy, go out and make a very funny, lighthearted take on fraud.
Yeah.
It could be in really bad taste, right? So you really have to toe that line. And it's not easy. And I understand for agencies, it's even harder because you don't live in my sort of environment every day. You don't understand what I'd have to deal with. So, co-creation, I think, is critical. The ability to have a two-way conversation and a very transparent one, I think, is critical. But also know, where that line is, where that, and it's fuzzy, it's gray, it's not that simple. Sometimes we'll put something out there unintentionally, hit something else, or, sort of be sort of, what do they say? Tone deaf.
Yeah.
Right?
And have you had any blowback from that campaign?
No.
No? Okay.
I'm not, hopefully not. Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware. And I think, we've earned it a bit because the first one we did was the Shaggy one. I don't know if you remember that. It wasn't me.
It wasn't me.
Yeah. Then last year, I'm a fan of dark humor. So we did the dark humor one, which is, this fraudster, obviously with a leopard print shirt on and a really big wig. Wrote a book on how to defraud people and is selling it as like an ebook.
Okay.
And he wrote the book on what do we call it? We took a play on how to influence. What is it? How to make friends and influence people.
Yes.
I can't remember the title. In any case, so this character, he goes out and he's, teaching people. Look, this is what I do, and he changes his voice as he's talking on the phone. A bit of dark humor there. I don't know if it landed with everyone as much. Because songs are much more universal, particularly popular songs like Shaggy or I Will Survive. But, I think it's something that hopefully people come to expect of us once a year. We do something as crazy as that. So they're perhaps much more forgiving.
Yeah.
Or give us a bit more room.
Give it a little bit of leeway with it. Amazing. I think we've covered so much ground. I really, really appreciate you having in, having a chat with us. We went through so many things. I think there's a huge amount of takeaways there for the listeners.
Good to hear.
So thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me. Absolute pleasure.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.